Imagine living next door to a man who smiled at everyone, went to church every Sunday, worked as a city official, and raised a family. He looked like the perfect neighbor. But behind that ordinary life was one of America's most notorious serial killers. He called himself BTK, which stood for bind, torture, kill. For more than 30 years, he managed to stay hidden while taunting police and terrifying an entire city. He believed he was smarter than every detective chasing him. But in the end, one careless mistake destroyed the secret he had protected for decades. This is the true story of Dennis Rader, the man behind the BTK Killer. Dennis Rader was born on March 9, 1945, in Kansas. As he grew older, he appeared to live a completely normal life. He served in the U.S. Air Force, got married, had 2 children, attended church regularly, and later worked as a compliance officer for his local community. Friends, neighbors, and even members of his church described him as polite, responsible, and trustworthy. No one imagined that he was living a horrifying double life. Behind closed doors, Rader had disturbing fantasies about controlling and dominating others. Over time, those fantasies grew darker. Instead of seeking help, he secretly planned violent crimes that would eventually shock the entire country. In January 1974, Rader committed his first known murders in Wichita, Kansas. He broke into the home of the Otero family, where Joseph Otero, Julie Otero, and 2 of their young children were inside. He tied them up and murdered all 4. The brutal crime left investigators searching for answers, but there were very few clues. The city was terrified because no one knew who could commit such a horrific act. Over the next several years, more victims were attacked. Rader carefully selected his targets, watched their routines, and planned every detail before striking. His goal wasn't only to kill, he wanted complete control over his victims. He later referred to these attacks using the initials BTK, meaning bind, torture, kill, a name he created for himself. Unlike many criminals who tried to stay invisible, Rader wanted attention. He mailed letters to newspapers and law enforcement describing his crimes and demanding recognition. The messages frightened the public because they showed that the killer enjoyed creating fear just as much as committing the crimes. Every new letter reminded people that BTK was still out there. Then, just as suddenly as he had appeared, the killing stopped. Years passed without another known attack. Many people believed the killer had died, moved away, or been arrested for another crime. The investigation gradually became a cold case. Meanwhile, Dennis Rader continued living what looked like a respectable life. He became active in his church, participated in community events, and worked as a city code enforcement officer. To everyone around him, he was simply a normal husband, father, and neighbor. The truth remained hidden for decades. In 2004, after years of silence, Rader made a decision that would change everything. Feeling forgotten, he wanted the world to remember BTK. He began sending new letters, photographs, and other messages to police and local media, believing he could once again outsmart investigators. At one point, he asked police whether a floppy disk could be traced back to its owner. Investigators publicly suggested that it could not. Trusting that answer, Rader mailed a floppy disk. It was the biggest mistake of his life. Digital forensic experts examined the disk and recovered hidden metadata that pointed to a church connected to Dennis Rader. Detectives quietly investigated further and collected DNA evidence, which confirmed that the respected church member and city employee was, in fact, the BTK Killer. In February 2005, police arrested Dennis Rader. During court proceedings, he calmly admitted responsibility for 10 murders committed between 1974 and 1991. His emotionless descriptions of the crimes shocked the courtroom and the nation. The man who had spent decades pretending to be an ordinary citizen had finally been exposed. Dennis Rader was sentenced to multiple consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. His arrest brought long-awaited answers to the families of his victims and ended one of the longest-running serial murder investigations in American history. The BTK case remains one of the most disturbing examples of how someone can hide behind an ordinary appearance for years while living a secret life. It also showed how advances in forensic science and one simple mistake were enough to solve a mystery that had remained unsolved for more than 3 decades. Sometimes, the people who seem the most ordinary are hiding the darkest secrets of all.